I invite the awardee, the prestigious awardee, Professor Munson, to now deliver his oration address.
Well, as you can imagine, I have been enjoying this very much. I have enjoyed it particularly because my family has been included. And most of you are married and will understand how much shared joy there is when your spouse is being honored. And you have no idea how happy I am that this award is not to me. This is an award to Mary and me. And really is. Let me give you a little bit of history. The first time I was in Madurai, I had a serious aching back. I mean, it was miserable, so miserable I had been spending the time in a wheelchair in London before arriving in Madurai. But when I did arrive in Madurai, I was met by Dr. Nachar, and she said, "Fred, I want to show you the new hospital being built." Well, I figured that my back could stand that much. I had no idea that this was involved. This would be going up and down several stairways, but we did. And on the way that we were going from the first floor to the second, which was not quite ready yet, and the third, which was entirely unready, Dr. Nachar pointed out that there was work to be done, and that work would involve using my skills that she understood I had. I don't think at that point she was doubtful. As a salary administrator. And so indeed, soon after, Mr. Tulsi Raj and myself started out on a salary survey. But before that, Dr. Nachar deposited us at the guest house, which was right next door to Ramaswamy and Janaki, the sister and the brother-in-law of Dr. V. Janaki was a marvelous person, and she and Mary became dear friends almost overnight. I can remember the tremendous affection that developed almost as a matter of hours. And Janaki and Mary would be going back and forth in the back door from her house over to the guest house and from the guest house to her house. And we became a part of the family because Mary became a part of the Aravind family. I'm not quite that good on making friends, but I tell you, I got a winner when I got my wife. My first contact with Dr. V was actually at the University of Michigan. He was visiting Dr. Larry Brilliant, an epidemiologist who had been active in the smallpox eradication campaign. Dr. V said, "You know what I'm really looking for is somebody to help me set up management at the Aravind Eye Hospital." And Larry said, "Well, you know, there's a fellow downstairs that teaches hospital administration, and he spent 3 years in India." So Dr. V thought that was enough of a basis to at least come down and visit to see whether I would be useful to him or not. Well, Dr. V is a country boy, and so am I. We both were born and brought up in the country. We understand what chores are, and the fact that if you've got cows to milk, you can't put it off until tomorrow. They've got to be milked. And that kind of focus on being a farmer connected us very early, and it kept strengthening throughout the years because as Nachar said, Dr. V and I became very close friends. Dr. V also became a very close friend of the family, and also with Mary's mother, who lived with us. And Mary's mother, some of you who have visited with us know her as Granny. Granny was always kind of impressed with the fact that she was a little bit older than Dr. V. But it was a very nice relationship. Dr. V wanted me to review whether or not a young man he was considering for management was acceptable. At least that's what he told me. It was all nonsense. He had him picked out. His name was Tulsi Raj. And he was a member of the family, and he wanted Tulsi to come back and work in Madurai. Now, Tulsi and Chitra had moved to Calcutta, a lovely city. Mary and I loved our time in Calcutta, and Tulsi and Chitra also loved it there also. But Dr. V was offering him a chance to cut his salary in half and work twice as hard under the view of the whole family. And he was not a doctor, and you know how non-doctors rate in Aravind. I mean, so, but foolishly, well, not joking about it, Chitra and Tulsi had a decision to make, to leave a city they loved in order to do work that they thought was worthwhile. And I think there was probably not very much question, but I do remember that it was a joint decision, and that this was something that Chitra and Tulsi talked about in order to, before they made the decision to come. When they did make that decision, then Dr. V had completed his basic structure of his Aravind Eye Hospital, a structure which I might say changed very little over 40-odd years. He had his brother, G.S., a man of tremendous capacity in construction and squeezing a rupee like you wouldn't believe. He was legendary. And that was, of course, absolutely essential for the hospital. So that G.S. was a key member of the team. Then he also had his sister, Nachar, and a very capable ophthalmologist, and her husband, Dr. Nam, another very capable ophthalmologist, and his sister, Dr. Vijayalakshmi, another very capable ophthalmologist, and his husband, and her husband, Dr. Srinivasan. So now he had an administrator. And I want you to realize what it means to have an administrator that you can trust. And I will be saying a little bit more about this later on in my remarks. But at that point, Dr. Venkataswamy had Tulsi. And that meant that he had someone that he could rely on and work with, and it was just fundamental that he had that capacity now. So things went very well for Aravind. They continued to go well. They had a powerful, effective group of doctors. They had an administrative leadership that was competent and trustworthy. And all of this then led to a rapid growth. And as you were, if you were aware of or present this morning, you had the story of Aravind coming from nowhere to being a follower, but now being followed. Aravind, instead of taking their notes from somebody else, others taking their direction from Aravind. And this continued so that Aravind itself became a leader, and a recognized leader, a leader that was recognized in some ways internationally fully as much as they were nationally. Aravind had become a model for the organization. That growing respect was, of course, a perfect fit with Dr. V's mission of eliminating needless blindness. Now, there are two dangers that every successful organization faces, and they are serious. The first is success breeds confidence, kind of a relaxed, we must be doing things well, so let's keep doing them. And the second real danger is age. So as organizations age and are successful, they are under the twin threats of decline. There's no time, nor is it appropriate, to talk about some of the marvelous eye hospitals that have achieved wonderful success, but flamed out and disappeared. There is real danger in success and getting old. Aravind had leaders who recognized this is true. And particularly Ravi and Tulsi spent time thinking about how can we help ourselves avoid this trap. And they decided they would put together a group of people who would try to think through the core issues that define the Aravind values. And if at some point, it's not there yet, but if at some point we can get a slide up of the 7 principles that a group of us developed to frame what the Aravind values were, and while they're working on that, I will talk to you about them. First of all, we recognized that it was crucial There we are. Is it up there yet? Yeah, there we are. First of all, I should let you know that when I gave a title to this talk, Exploring the Edges, it comes directly from some work that Pavitra Krishnan did. Pavi said that the values often cannot be carried to extremes. If they do, they tend to conflict with other values. So if you spend too much time on frugality, you can have real problems with focusing on what your staff needs. Or if you are too concerned with your staff needs, you can start frittering away money. The essential point is that values are important, but they have to be kept in balance with all the other values. Hovey also pointed out something that we were not aware of until she made that clear, and that was that organizations don't have values. People have values. Organizations are that the values that organizations live by are some combination of the values of individuals in the organization. But organizations do have principles that rest on the values that are central to the people who make up the organization. So Pavi was pointing out to us that think of the organization of Aravind as having a set of principles which are core but don't cover everything. As you get to the edge of these principles, you begin to get into conflict or other relations with the values. So, who was it? It was Divya that said, if organizations don't have values, what do they have? Said, let's call them pillars. And that's how the name came, the 7 pillars that define for us the Aravind way. This was a group that Divya was a part of, Tulsi was a part of, Meg was a part of, Devendra was a part of, so was I. And Pavi at a distance, she was not here, but very much a part of the system. And I want to talk to you a little bit about these values because they are so important. They do define what Aravind is. The first and the fundamental one is it is a principle of the Aravind eye care system of making eye care accessible to all. All includes people in Alaska, people in South Australia, people in Russia, people everywhere in the world. Dr. V's vision was making eye care accessible to all. You couldn't do it all at once, but you could always keep working on making eye care accessibility available to more and more and more people. That was a core. That was one of the founding principles, one of the founding pillars of Aravind. It could not be relevant unless there was an absolute insistence on high quality care. Dr. V was so insistent on this that and that quality became a part of the thinking of this organization from its very beginning. And these two core pillars were very central, but fully as central was this patient comes first. Now, patient comes first is a little bit different from marketing or anything like that. It is a feeling in the heart of the people who are in patient contact that that contact is central. And that became very much a part of Aravind and was recognized as we were framing these values, that this was one of the four basic organizing principles or pillars that the Aravind Eye system was founded. The fourth and the other major pillar was self-reliance. I'm so glad that this morning, there was a proper emphasis on the fact that self-reliance was a core value of Dr. V. He perhaps at one point he would have been glad to accept other funds, but they didn't come, and his fundamental recognition was that if you were not self-reliant, then you were somebody's servant. And he didn't want to be anyone's servant except the patients he was caring for. So that self-reliance was a core value, and when I was most active here, that insistence on self-reliance almost was a fetish, because the Aravind Eye Care system did not want to have to accept any dependence. Now, be careful here, because this is one of what Pavi was talking about on the problem of the edges. If you needed something that there was no possibility of getting yourself, then you should go out and look for it. And that's what they did when they looked for IOL technology. And that's what they still do, even if it is only teaching technology. That is, there is no reluctance to take from anyone, to borrow from anyone, so long as you are, you might say, borrowing upwards. But the idea of having to depend on something, Dr. V knew a couple, perhaps 3 eye hospitals that had a mission focus, a dependence on mission, and those were sometimes working very, very well for a generation. Sometimes okay for 2 generations, but by the 3rd generation, it was not working so well anymore. But an organization which was self-reliant could determine its own success. Staff centricity, that is, the notion that you have to achieve the kind of care you want through your own staff, is central. Frugality, I will defer to GS for a full discussion of the importance of frugality. But I tell you, you'd better be careful of money when you don't have very much. And if you are trying to build hospitals and you are trying to find ways to pay your staff and you are trying to do as much as you can, as rapidly as you can, led by Dr. V was kind of a saint. Mary and I both felt the quality of saintliness in this man, which is to say, he had a vision that was kind of above what we were accustomed to, but he also had a vision that was kind of a little independent of what other people might need. I think Dr. V was never quite clear on why doctors had to have salaries. But he had an open mind about it, so when Nachar said, "Fred, I don't care what else you do, but you've got to do something about doctors' salaries," I took that as gospel, and Tulsi and I actually went out and we did our salary survey, and we came in with a recommendation, and I think it was a 10% increase. It was a pretty substantial increase that went across the board. I can add a little story now to that. I didn't come back the second year, but the year after I did come back. Aravind hadn't done a thing with salaries since I'd been. So Tulsi and I went out again and did a survey and found that, yes, indeed, other people had been raising salaries, and so Aravind should do the same. And we came in with a recommendation, and it was accepted. So we got another nice increase in salaries. Next year I came back. Doctors saying, "Oh!" Which helped clarify immediately that I would never touch salaries at that point again. Because if there's anything that's poison, it's having your staff think that someone else is responsible for salary structure. So, but in any event, we did get to the point where now we were moving in a way that the salaries and the growth and the success was doing well. But it was that then that this notion, and I should mention the next 2 points, the next single point, sharing. Sharing, of course, is the reason for LICO. Sharing is the reason why Aravind always has encouraged its competition. Doesn't matter whether it's competition, because if you are interested in reducing needless blindness, a competitor doing it is just as good as you're doing it. The goal is to reduce needless blindness. I can't emphasize that too much. One of the things that made us so happy to work with Aravind was this need to, sorry about that, I'll try to keep my mouth away a little bit, was this need to always focus on the values that were really true. And these 7 values, or 7 pillars, became the Aravind way. And they are the Aravind way today. I don't know of anything that is more important a characterization of this organization than those 7 statements, because they reflect what kind of an organization you are a part of. That's terribly important. Let me go on now to how this talk became exploring the edges. We said at the beginning that that every one of these pillars kind of has an edge when you can go too far with it. I want to point to three areas where it seems to me Aravind has been doing very good work and needs to continue to do very good work. First of these is human resources. I can't emphasize more than staff centricity does that how well patients are treated depends on the attitude of the staff that cares for them. And that staff is occasionally doctors, but 90% or 75% MLOPs. The mid-level ophthalmic personnel are the core caregivers in Aravind in all of its places. They spend more time with patients, are more likely to be responsive to patients, are more interested in what patients have to say. I don't have anything against doctors, but they're not very good on the whole in focusing on patients. Dr. V was a sterling exception to that, and Dr. Nachar as well. Dr. Nachar is always an exception. Seriously, human resources is probably one of the central issues that Aravind has to keep focused on. And because the mid-level ophthalmic personnel are the ones that are most directly in contact with patients, they are the most important human resources. No question that the quality of the doctors is very important, and Arvind's reputation now has made that question one of doctors wanting to be here, and that is, I don't want to give Prajna too much credit, but Prajna has helped focus on the human resources, the doctor's side, in a way that has been extremely beneficial to the organization. Just as Dr. Nachar has been the one who has helped keep the focus on MLOPs, Dr. Prajna has been the one to help keep the focus on doctors. There is another group. Those are the administrators and the people who are the clerical staff. That group is going to grow. It is going to become more important, and it is going to sort of it will disappear in the attention that is given to the MLOPs and to the doctors. I do want to point out that one of the things that a good organization has is a human resource that is clinically excellent at its top, the chief medical officer. And I do want to suggest that an excellent organization has something equivalent to a chief administrative officer at the top. Not everybody recognizes that that's what Aravind had. Dr. V and Tulsi. There was a true chief administrative officer working with a true chief medical officer. If more hospitals were able to move in that notion of equality of respect and importance, there would be some less frustration on the part of chief medical officers fussing about their administrative load. Because if they had a really competent management person, as Dr. V had in Tulsi, there would be much less concern about those things because it would just be left to that. So that's a second point about the human resources. Another issue that has to be a continuing concern to Aravind is the way that decisions get located. Every organization has to locate key decisions. I don't care whether it is selecting the next chief medical officer for a hospital or whether it is what medicine to prescribe to a patient. Decisions have to get located, and the process of locating those decisions is central to effective organization. Probably the most powerful way to locate decisions is to delegate. That is, you look for a range of decisions that are genuine, that are generally routine and not creating problems, and you say, I don't need to have responsibility for that. My subordinate can handle that. If that subordinate feels that he has that pretty well or she has that pretty well under control, they can delegate it down. Now, if they are perfectly routine, then don't bother at all. Just set up standard operating procedures. And the standard SOPs, standard operating procedures, can handle that. And so you've gotten rid of that whole bunch of decisions because nobody has to think about it. They have to just know what the rules are and implement them. But there are still some others that are left. And that is something that a wise organization keeps attending to. I've heard suggestions that Madurai is a mare's nest, a place where you've got a mixture of top management for the system and management for the hospital. And I've mentioned this because I think I heard this 40 years ago and I haven't stopped hearing it since. There is a concern about having a management over 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 hospitals that is sort of mixed in with the management of one of the hospitals. It's a continuing problem. I know it's being looked at today. It will be looked at tomorrow. And 5 years from now, there will be a struggle. But this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about when I say that beyond human resources, which is a continuing need to be addressed, there's a continuing need to look at how decisions are being located. Third and final point that I am wanting to suggest is that innovation is at the heart of the success of any large organization. I've been fascinated by, I haven't followed it in detail, but 30 years ago, the darling company was General Electric. Jack Welch or John Welch, I can't remember what his name was the head of it, and he was doing great. It's not even in the top 50 anymore. You've got to make sure that your company is staying alive and innovating in ways that are appropriate. And if you stop and think about Aravind, you say, of all the laughable nonsense to say that they have to worry about innovation, they are just one continuous innovation. Everything that has made Aravind great is an innovation. So I will only say that I am probably more impressed with their capacity to innovate at the highest level than I can express. But there still is the need to have people at the work level feel an obligation to improve, to suggest, and that kind of innovation is less certain because it doesn't have the same kind of pressure that we have at the top of the organization. But it's coming. It's coming just the way an attention to the decision systems are coming. It's coming just the way the human resource improvement is coming. These are things that are getting always better at Aravind, and is what it has made it such a continuing pleasure to work with them. Thank you.